I'm Scott Larimore. I've been asked to talk about sustainability and composting toilets for recreation management and public facilities. I've worked with a firm that specializes in composting toilets for the last 5 years. I've been on installations and replacements around the country, from the beginning of parks in Missouri to replacements of failed composters and soup pies. So I've seen some of what works and what doesn't, and kind of starting to form some conclusions. I also have a composter in my house. I've lived with one for 3 to 4 years, so I have some personal experience, and I've enjoyed it. Sustainability. According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, sustainability is a method of harvesting or using resources in a way that they're not depleted or permanently damaged. When one talks of sustainability in this culture right now, we often talk of off-the-grid living, green cars, electric cars, or small organic farms. But really, when we talk about sustainability, we need to talk about soil and what soil is. Yeah, soil. It takes a century to build an inch of soil under ideal conditions. Yet, with poor farming practices, we can have a field that's productive completely destroyed and barren within a day. 1930s, Dust Bowl happened. Poor practices, farmers, wind blew the topsoil off. So the ill treatment of soil has been one of the major factors that has led to the collapse of many of the history's complex societies. So farming practices are not the only cause for the degradation, the degrading of soil quality. Every time one removes crops from a field, nutrients are removed. Now, you think of sustainability. You're removing nutrients. They have to be put back on the land. How are we doing that right now? The agrochemical industry. We're using synthetic fertilizers for the most part to try to rebuild the fertility of the soils. Now there's 3 big elements for soil that we need. It's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Now nitrogen can be added back to the soil by growing legumes, which have a symbiotic relationship with the bacteria and the roots. And they pull atmospheric nitrogen into the soil, and you till those back into the soil, and you put your nitrogen back. Potassium, it's pretty readily available. Potash, wood ash, you can rebuild it. Now phosphorus. Phosphorus is the one that is in short supply. Short enough that last year, local farmers in the Flathead Valley could not buy phosphorus. The global market for phosphorus was it's used up. Well, it was in the, earlier this century that people found in the Pacific Islands, bird guano islands, like 100-foot tall cliffs of bird shit, high in phosphorus. And we've been mining that, but it's starting to run out. And phosphorus is one of the big keys for nutrients. So if we're using up these nutrients, we have to find them other places to rebuild our soil. Is that sustainable? Is it even possible? Well, Eastern societies have done it for over 8,000 years. No big secret to it. Farmers would go into the cities and bring back human waste and turn it back into their soil. And with it, the nutrient cycle was completed. What was taken from the land was put back with the land. And up until modern day, they've been there. They've been eaten. The fields have been abundant. Food. So the way I look at it, this is where the composting toilets come in. It's a modern way for us to sustainably live, to be able to take from the land and easily provide back to the land. So the composting toilet in a recreation setting, commercial recreation setting. There's many people out there selling what they say are composting toilets, but not all of them work. In fact, very few of them work. Most of them are just a glorified holding tank that needs to be pumped that doesn't actually compost. So there's some key elements that it takes for a composting toilet to actually work. Now, it has to be a certain size. You know, if your unit's too small, it's not going to have enough material in there to compost efficiently. And if it's too large, maintenance. I mean, are you going to be able to get into and remove 10 yards of material? No, probably not. So there's kind of this middle ground of a unit that's small enough yet large enough. It's kind of, you know, an odd thing to think of. You know, like 100 uses a day, that's probably for a medium-sized unit about all the more you can handle. 100 uses. So other big components that you need to look for when somebody's trying to sell you a composting toilet, or you're trying to evaluate if a composting toilet is actually going to be effective, one of them is the leachate. The material, the liquid that's coming off, needs to be recycled back into the pile. 80% of the phosphorus, excess phosphorus and nitrogen that we take in comes out as urine. So if this just runs out into the ground, runs out into the river, it's just lost. And you're like, right here, look at this. I mean, excess runs into the river. This river dumps into Flathead Lake. Flathead Lake in the last 10 years has having problems with algae blooms. We've lost these nutrients. These nutrients need to be returned back to our fields for food, but instead they're growing algae. And loss of pristine lakes. So an effective leachate recycle system where it's taking the leachate from the bottom of a composting tank, or probably bottom of gravity, and circulating it back on top. And then that also keeps the pile moist, which helps for composting, and it also recirculates, inoculates the pile with bacteria. And this is what bacteria to start the composting process. An effective unit has a fan. The fan not only removes odor from the facility, but it's also providing oxygen to the compost pile, so you have an aerobic fermentation, not an anaerobic. Think anaerobic, think of a vault toilet and just that smelly mess. You know, if you have a good aerobic environment going on, you don't have the smell. It's kind of, I think, more like, you know, like a barn smell instead of a nasty vault of human feces. Big difference. Another pretty key component to a composting toilet is separation. The stabilized compost needs to be easily removed from the tank while not having to deal with the raw material. And you know, it could be many different ways. You could have where you have your raw material on top, separated from the stabilized material on the bottom, remove the stabilized material. It could, you know, be multiple containers where you have matter that's in a container and then you skip over and leave it for like a year, and then you come back to it, so it becomes, you know, stabilizes. Bulking agent. Bulking agent seems to be very important for composting toilets to work effectively. And that's just, you know, like wood chips. It's something to add not only more surface area, but also a moisture absorbent to keep the tank to absorb more of the nutrients coming from the urine.